The Chicago Bears, they've lost one of their OTAs this week because they were training too hard, too much contact in practice, and they were forced to lose one of their days. You lose it. You can't practice too hard in today's NFL. But as Kevin Fishbane of The Athletic pointed out, 4 of the last 5 NFL teams to have been penalized for OTA infractions have gone on to make the playoffs. We were talking about the 49ers and the Cowboys last year. The Ravens in 2018 and in 2016, the Seattle Seahawks did the same thing. And you know that this was not an accident. This is by design. They're smart. Eberflus knows what he's doing. It's kind of like when you go and you tailgate at a stadium. I know this happens at Angel Stadium all the time. You're not allowed to have alcohol out there, but you know what you do? You pour your booze in a red cup, a red Solo cup, and you're sitting there. You know what you're doing. The cops know what you're doing. You have a little bit of a dance. Like, we know what's going on, but as long as everybody's staying within the rules, everything's cool. I think the Bears purposely took this to the limit. You know, they want football players. They want guys who love ball. And there is no way to weed people out quicker than having tough practices. That's how they get rid of me. That's how I stopped playing football. It was too rough. So I love what is going on. I love the culture change in Chicago. I love what the Flus is up to. The Flus is on the loose. Flus is on the loose. Whatever. Sammy, we've wasted too much time. Let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Tuesday night. You know what that means. We have got a great show for you tonight on Take It to the Rank. We have the managing editor and a senior reporter for the Draft Network. Now, she went to 2 of my favorite schools, Northwestern, ASU. She worked for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, went down, scored a ring, and then bailed on that operation. There are some things about her we're worried about. She's a Lou Malnati's person. She does collect cards, which is cool. She likes Diet Coke over Pepsi, which is all right. But she's a John Cena file, thinks Gretzky is better than Lemieux. I'm inferring this or implying it. She goes to Total Wine. She doesn't go to Bevmo. I don't know if she's a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan. Maybe we'll bring her on. But you know what? It's June 6th. It's the birthday of not only David Montgomery, but of Dean Martin, one of the greatest Italians of all time. So it makes sense that we would bring on Carmen Vitali. Carmen, where are you? How are you? How are you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic after that intro. Good Lord.
How much of it did I get right?
You got the surprising amount of it actually. But you didn't infer the Cubs or Sox fan, really? That's interesting. What did I? You do your homework. I would think that you would know that.
I do my homework. What is it? What side do you follow?
I'm a Sox fan.
That's what I don't think
that
I wanted. I didn't want to believe it. That's the thing is like you work. See, because I worked for the Dodgers at one point.
I worked for the Dodgers too.
I was out in. They sent me out to San Bernardino to work with them. I had to pull up to Ontario Airport one time. Picked up this prospect who didn't speak English. And so I'm driving him back to his, to the hotel, the Radisson in San Bernardino. I get in there and he's from the Dominican and they're hassling him because he wants to be able to make long distance phone calls to his family in the Dominican. And they're giving him a hard time. And so I have to come over and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, he doesn't have a credit card. I'm like, he's this 19-year-old kid. And I'm like, okay, but like, who's paying for the room?
Right.
Like,
he's not paying for
the Dodgers are. I'm like, do you not think the Dodgers are not going to cover his phone calls? And they're like, well, like, and they wouldn't do it. So I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, take my credit card, please. Like, let him, like this young man is from the Dominican. He's 19. He's sent to San Bernardino, California. Like, let him call home here, whatever it costs. The Dodgers did reimburse me for that. By the way, the young man in question was Adrian Beltre. So
casual 19-year-old Adrian Beltre.
Adrian
No,
Beltre.
I worked for the Dodgers in 2013. So, and I never had to make the trek to San Bernardino. But I did live in Manhattan Beach, so I had to go from Manhattan Beach to Dodger Stadium, which was like an hour and 15 minutes every day. God. But yeah, not that. No. I remember taking the 405, or like we got out of a game. I think it was like 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I was like, I could probably take the 405 right now. It's 1 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. No, I sat in bumper to bumper traffic on the way back.
No, that's the worst time. That's the worst time in Los Angeles to travel, when nobody's on the road. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. But we're super thrilled to have you here, despite. So since you aren't a Cubs person, which I kind of figured.
Okay, but this is the thing. Okay. I don't hate the Cubs.
You do.
I don't. I was very happy when they won the World Series. Like, any team that brings the World Series to this city, I'm not going to be mad at you. Why would I be mad at you?
That's true.
And I lived in Ridgeville.
All right, that's fair. I guess if the Dodgers ever win a World Series, I'd probably be happy for them, but they haven't, so I don't have to. Maybe this year, but they haven't won one. And I know, listen, and don't bring up 2020, because nobody out here recognizes that as a World Series championship. You won a tournament in Texas. That was it. The Texas two-step, the bubble, whatever.
As long as that doesn't cross leagues, because the 2020 Super Bowl very much counted. Okay. You
know what? Well, I will say this: you played, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played almost as many games as the Dodgers that season, so it's about the same. Like, you know what I'm saying? But we're happy. First of all, we're happy to have you on the show tonight. First and foremost. Second of all, we're happy to have you back in Chicago. What was it like working for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I imagine, again, like working for teams, I always found to be really fun. What was your experience like with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah, I can't say enough about it. I got, just to be in a building, in an NFL building was, there's so many things that you don't see from the outside. Even when you work in the industry, you don't see it unless you're inside. And that was, I got close to so many wonderful people and got to learn from some of the best, football minds in the industry. And I can't say enough about the players, the coaches, the staff that was there. They all treated me so well, and I had such a wonderful experience. And it ran the gamut, because when I first got there, they had the 9-7 season. I was like, oh, this is pretty great. And then it was back-to-back 5-11 seasons. And then you get the new coach, and then, everyone's optimistic again, but you still have a losing season. And then all of a sudden you get someone called Tom Brady, and you win a Super Bowl. So I put in my dues. I like to think that I put in my dues. I was rewarded, despite the fact that it was in a COVID season, but I'll take a Super Bowl anyway I can get it. And it was pretty magical, honestly. I think there was many times that season where I was pinching myself going, this isn't real, right? This is all a simulation. Like, we're all, what's happening? This can't be happening. This isn't true. This is but it was, and I've got a ring to prove it. So.
No, that's amazing. There's not much more you can ask for at that point. And that season, it definitely was real. There was a full season of games. The Super Bowl had fans in the stands. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on. Who was and I know this is, this is Bears talk, but I got to get this out of the way. I love Rob Gronkowski. I always found him to be like the coolest. Like, he's so fun to be around. Did you have a lot of interaction with him? What was your experience with Rob Gronkowski?
I made sure that the very first interview I did with him, I was wearing an Arizona State sweatshirt. Because in fact, so him and I are the exact same age, and I watched him in college. He was at Arizona while I was at Arizona State. So I saw both territorial cups that he played in. They split the series in those two games, but he kicked, the Sun Devil's ass every time. I don't know if I can say that.
But in a couple of weeks, you're not going to be able to.
I know. So from that moment on, it was like this kind of rivalry between us. And actually, during Territorial Cup week last year, I was standing outside the locker room. I was talking to our nutritionist, or the Bucs nutritionist, and I get this shove from behind me, and I look up, and it's Rob.
Oh my gosh!
And I was like, "Where's all this I'm like, "Whoa, bro! Like, where's all this hostility coming from?" He's like, "You know what week it is?" And I was like, "Oh, right." And so he was like, I'm like, "Oh shoot, we're supposed to hate each other right now." He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "All right, let's bet." And actually, funny enough, our team nutritionist the Bucs team nutritionist, also went to Arizona State.
Oh.
And then our defensive quality control coach walks up, who also worked at Arizona State. So now you've got 3 Sun Devils on Rob, and now we start pressuring him into, all right, well, what's the bet then? Like put your money where your mouth is, essentially. You're going to come up from behind me and give me some, flack for it. So he's like, all right, fine. I will wear Arizona State stuff if Arizona State wins. And keep in mind the prior year, ASU beat the University of Arizona 70-7. So I'm why are you even taking this bet? It's nothing happened that made Arizona get significantly better. They were horrible last year.
Right.
And to his credit, he took it anyway, and he paid his debts. We shoved a Sparky pillow buddy in his hands, and he had to wear an Arizona State t-shirt, and it was on NFL Network.
Yeah.
And everybody picked it all up and all that, but it was because, and then it made me really proud, actually, because then Sun Devil football, they posted it to their feed. They were all really proud. I heard from all these guys. I worked for the Arizona State football team when I was there. Right. And I heard from all these guys that I used to play, that I used to be around. They were tagging me in the comments, yeah, Carmen, let's go. I was just that's so fun. It was such a fun experience. So yeah, he's a great guy, and he's just he is exactly who you think he is, and he's a wonderful, wonderful human. He's so friendly, he's so nice, and just has the best intentions always. So
I can't say enough about him. And I know when I used to be heavily into the Madden, I had him on my Mutt team, and it always looked good to have Gronkowski wearing the 87 in a Bears uniform. I told him about it one time, and he actually engaged me. We were doing a Madden event, so he has to but he was super cool. And I remember, I figured that was you because I remember all the ASU stuff. And it's oh yeah, that's fun. It's fun to see him having to suffer. And I kind of, ASU's my pseudo Pac-12 school. I like Northwestern. So we're very simpatico on that. Northwestern would be my Big Ten team. So I'm oh yeah, that's who I would pick. So I went to Cal State Fullerton. We don't do football. We have Mooch. That was it.
Mooch.
But you were talking about being there in Tampa Bay when they made the switch to Bruce Arians. They brought in older guy. Mm-hmm. Now the Bears have made the switch. They brought in Matt Eberflus. What do you think of that move? Do you see any sort of similarities? But do you think that this is a good move, or just a get back to a football kind of situation for the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, Bruce was before he was even a head coach. I think he was the oldest coach to become a head coach when he got that opportunity with the Cardinals. Yeah. So he was already he was a late kind of bloomer, I guess you want to say. And Eberflus has been obviously a coordinator. He's been in the league for a very long time. This was overdue probably for him to become a head coach. He's not quite as old as Bruce was.
Right.
But I like the switch to Eberflus for another reason, in that I feel like the Bears have been trying to make fetch happen with offensive-minded head coaches for the longest. I know that's a Mean Girls reference. I don't know if people understand that. But
give us a little bit of credit.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
On Wednesdays we wear pink. Okay. Happy?
Thank you. Okay. Great.
Are we good? Are we good now?
We're good. We're on the same page. I just feel that's never going to be Chicago's brand of football. You can have a good offense, and I hope to God that this is it, and Justin Fields is going to lead us to the promised land of having a productive and very good offense. But Chicago's bread and butter is defense. It's always been defense. It doesn't matter the regime that it's under. My entire life, I've become a defensive girl, a defensive-minded football watcher, even because of the fact that that's all I was watching growing up was defense. So I'm really glad that they're kind of giving back into that. You've got a defensive-minded head coach, and I have a lot of high hopes for Luke Getsy, despite where he comes from, to lead this offense. And
look at the other places he came from.
Yeah, right. All the other places. We'll stick to that. But I think that he can really do a lot of great things with Justin Fields. He's got a really good, moldable, developmental quarterback, and you can build an offense around him. And I think that it's a good balance too, because Ryan Poles is a former offensive lineman. So you've got a general manager who kind of skews offense. You've got a head coach that skews defense. And from everything I've seen, from everything I've heard, those two are very much on the same page. So I love this kind of, I don't know. I think I've got a high, cautious optimism.
Right.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
There it is. Yeah. I was thinking of the cliche as well.
Yeah.
You know what though, but do we paralyze ourselves too much by always defaulting to defense. I like the hire. I like Eberflus. But do we grasp onto it a little too much? Like it's okay to score points as well, though.
No, it's definitely okay to score points, but I don't know. This is just the sick-minded individual I am. I would rather impose my will and prevent you from scoring points than being able. Like, I would rather a game that I hesitate to say, like the Super Bowl between like the Rams and the Patriots. That one,
right.
Like, I don't want a 9-0 Super Bowl, but like, I want to dominate a team so badly that they can't score points while then also scoring points. So I guess the Bucs Super Bowl. The Bucs Super Bowl was the perfect, like, the defense took over that game. Patrick Mahomes didn't score a touchdown, and yet you still scored 31 points. So it was the best of both worlds. Why can't I have that? Can I have that? I want that.
That's true. You know, that's one of the things that I tell to a lot of people, that the most successful football organization of all time, the New England Patriots, their defense was money. Like, they shut down a lot of teams. They're the greatest show on turf. They shut down a lot of teams. Even the game that they lost against the Giants in the perfect season, they still shut them down. They held them to 17 points. Shouldn't have lost that game. No. I think it's okay. I was of the mind when they were first, when we were doing the draft, like, we need offense. But I've come around. I guess like you, I've just accepted it. Like, yeah, okay, we're just always going to be defense. But I think that having a good defensive coach does, in a way, help an offense grow. Like, I think that having, like, we're not doing Justin Fields any favors if he has to go out and throw the ball 50 times a game, which teams like the Jets seem to think is a good idea. What do you think about all the criticism that the Bears have had to deal with this offseason? Because a lot of people are acting like the Bears have done absolutely nothing.
I mean, I think it's the slow and steady wins the race mentality. And honestly, though, like, that's the foundation for sustained success. I actually just did a piece for the Draft Network about how maybe the Bucs provided some sort of blueprint to guaranteed Super Bowl success. But like, that was very specific for a reason. They haven't built a roster that's necessarily sustainable in bringing in all these veterans and whatever. Like, if you want to win a Super Bowl within the next 2 years and that's it, you're going to make a deal with the devil. Do it. You can. Like, you bring in some established veterans, and like we saw the Rams do the same thing this last year. They won the Super Bowl. Now apparently the entire AFC is subscribed to this. But that's not the way to build sustained success. And I think that you need to build a really good foundation and develop all of these guys together, because at the end of the day, the teams that go far in the playoffs or the teams that make the Super Bowl are the ones that have meshed the best. They're the ones that kind of have all those intangibles. And if you kind of grow up together and you grow together in the same system, I mean, once that talent level kind of catches up, you're going to be set. And so I like the fact that, especially with it being a new general manager, first-time general manager, Ryan Poles is like, I'm not going to try and do something like super flashy just for the sake of doing something flashy. And I think it was further proof that him and Eberflus are on the same page in his first 2 draft picks, because you look at, like, Kyler Gordon was sitting there. How are you not supposed to take him? Knowing that Eberflus's defenses rely so heavily on that back end. And not to mention, then a couple picks later, Jaquan Brisker is still there. So while it may have been a more popular decision to go with a wide receiver right there, or to go with an offensive tackle, which are glaring offensive needs, he was like, no, I'm going to take these guys because they're here and we could use them. And I know that Eberflus wants them and he's going to be able to do good things with them. That's going to help the team overall. So like, that was the proof that I needed to know that these two could work together, essentially. And also, given how deep the draft was, like, I don't necessarily think there's a huge difference between George Pickens and Velus Jones. I don't. I think like it was a deep class for receivers. It was a deep draft in general because you had the COVID season that basically backloaded 2 drafts into one. So I think that he made the right decisions, even if they weren't the popular decisions. And I realize that Bears fans have been nothing but patient for the last few years, but I think that Bears fans just need to be a little bit more patient, and I think it's going to pay off. I really do.
It feels ridiculous that you would give up now. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you've come this far, if you've lived through, depending on how far you go back, if you've gone this far in your life to where you're like, now is not the time to throw in the towel. At least give this regime and an opportunity to go out there and prove itself. I think that when you look at what the Bears are doing, and I said this about the Lions and the Jets, the Giants and all these things. Like, what you want to see is that somebody has a plan that they're executing. And, the Giants had a very specific thing: get pass rush, get offensive line. The Jets were surrounding Zach Wilson with some talent. The Lions were doing something very similar. They got Aiden Hutchinson. They got the wide receiver. When you look at it, if you just told people, what are the Bears' three biggest weaknesses? And you're like, okay, offensive line, secondary, and wide receiver. And you're like, okay, here's what they did. They drafted 2 first-round talents for the secondary. Yeah. They drafted 5 linemen to go with 2 bookend tackles that they drafted the previous year. And they drafted a receiver from the SEC. You would think, like, that seems like they followed a plan and executed it, yes?
Yeah, I think so. And I know that I just think it's one of those things where people want immediate and like instant gratification out of this. And I don't think that that's going to be the case. But again, you're building a foundation. And yes, you address those needs. And again, it was a very deep class. And you can make all the judgments you want on draft night, but you're not going to know what happens until later on in the season, and you see this kind of all pan out. And that's when I feel like you can start making judgments. That's when you can say maybe this was or wasn't a good idea, or you get a feel for how good of evaluators these guys are. But as of right now, I mean, like you said, they addressed all the things that they needed to, whether or not it was when you thought that they needed to address them.
Player.
Right. Or your player or whoever it is. Like there's a lot that goes into draft evaluations in those war rooms. So if they feel comfortable with those, and they took a draft too where they had so little picks and they made it work. And that was, I mean, they multiplied and multiplied and multiplied their picks. And that was, I think that was really good to do. And again, a draft so deep.
100%. And, you talk about instant gratification. What's more instantly gratifying than drafting a 25-year-old? He's ready to go. He can rent a car. He can rent a car. He's a grown man. Now, I don't know if you saw the promo that I cut with him that I put on TikTok. It was on my Instagram too. Mm-hmm. But, I have now decided, after going through and evaluating everything, Velus Jones is my ride or die, for better or for worse. I don't care.
I love it.
What was your reaction to that pick? What was your evaluation on Velus? Because I know that some kid and I had talked about this on Twitter before the draft. You can go through. I've got the receipts are out there. I said that I liked him because I remember him at LS. I remember him at USC, and then he went to Tennessee. Obviously, didn't follow him as much when he went, especially his last season in Tennessee. But I'm like, I know he plays special teams. He's fast. He's a good player. So I was okay. I was like, okay. I was actually on the Tape Never Lies network when that pick happened. And I'm like, we got to see a little bit more about him. What was your evaluation of Velus Jones?
Yeah, I mean, again, SEC guy, and he also had the, it's not like he was some snuff coming out of high school either. He went to USC. Like, he was. Yeah. The whole narrative surrounding him, I think, was so unfair about how he's this 25-year-old, like, whatever. I'm like, since when does that mean any? Like, the only time an old draft pick means something or should have a negative connotation is in years prior, when like the only way a guy would have stayed in school that long is because of like medical red shirts or whatever, which kind of calls into question his durability, right? That's not the case this year. Again, like, there are multiple older prospects because of that COVID year, and then on top of that, he transferred, which hasn't historically been a thing. It's, only in recent years has that become more prevalent. So it's not that there's anything wrong with this guy, and you don't have any durability questions with him. And I honestly think that him being older will help him transition off the field. And I think he'll be ready to go on the field. Don't get me wrong, but like, especially when you come from a bigger program, I think that these guys, when they're making the transition to the NFL, it's actually harder when they're coming from these SEC programs or whatever, because everything is done for them outside of football. I remember like OJ Howard telling me when, like, I think it was a couple of years after he got drafted by the Bucs, that his first check sat in his gym bag for 3 months because he didn't know what direct deposit was. He didn't know that he was supposed to like go and do anything with it because Alabama did everything for him.
They sent the checks directly to his bank account.
Directly to his uncle's bank account.
Sure, his uncle's bank account.
I don't know. I don't want to like. Just
we're kidding. We're joking. It's a joke.
I don't know anything about OJ Howard's uncle, but it goes to show you though that these guys are not essentially as equipped to handle making that transition off the field. Whereas it's funny because I think actually smaller school guys, just to go up on a little bit of a tangent, smaller school guys are actually a little bit better equipped off the field because they're not, like the resources at Hobart. If you want to talk about Ali Marpet, like the resources at Hobart, like aren't what they are at Alabama. So like you're learning everything and you can kind of go about your business off the field. But that being said, I think that those extra couple of years of maturity will pay off the field, which is not nothing. I mean, there's something to be said for that.
I'm with it. I love everything about it. And I got an opportunity to talk to him at the rookie premiere. He was super gracious, super friendly. Hopefully we're going to get him on the show soon. I posted the promo with him on the Instagram stories, as the kids say. And he reposted it. So I'm like, okay, this dude, we're cool. So he's not embarrassed.
That's all it takes. So
I just don't want him to be embarrassed by me. That's the one thing that I'm worried about. He's like, who is this boomer posting this stuff? But he was very friendly. So hopefully we'll get him on the show soon. He's got extra time off because OTAs got canceled. But in any event, I think some of our viewers have some questions. And Vincent has asking, should us Bears fans be worried about today's OTAs being canceled? I gave my opinion at the top of the show. What do you think about that?
Absolutely not. Let me tell you, so from my experience working for a team, getting to be around practice every day, and I don't know if this is common knowledge, and the NFLPA sends out representatives to every team's OTA practices at some point or another, basically as snitches, like the players called them, the feds. Right. And they just to make sure that they are compliant within the collective bargaining agreement. They aren't asking the players to do anything that, they didn't previously agree to, all this other stuff. So like, it's my understanding that the Bears were given a warning, like, hey, we saw live contact, don't do it again. Well, what also happens is that every team in the league has to send in their practice tape to the league. So it wasn't that anybody snitched again. It was that like the league then reviewed those practice tapes to see if they, to follow up on the warning they'd given them and saw there was probably still live contact. Now that live contact was probably like, hey, I'm not going to pull that guy off of so-and-so. If he wants to, go at it, I'm going to let him. And that's a real football guy thing. And you know what? I love it. So these OTA practices too, I mean, most of it really is like the installs and the meetings and all that kind of stuff because they're glorified walkthroughs otherwise on the field. So the meat of everything is still in the meeting rooms at this point. So you're not losing that. You're just losing the on-field work, which again is really no big deal at this point to me at all.
And if you like football, tough guys, like this is what we want. This is like Camp Cupcake is over. Like get out there, they're playing ball. That's what we want.
Like, could you imagine though? And like, really, could you imagine an NFL coach going up to two guys that are like going at it and being like, whoa, fellas,
guys, we're going to get in trouble.
We're going to get in trouble. Like no one's going to do that. They're going to egg each other on because that's who these guys are. They're competitors. And I love it.
Yeah. And it's like, like when I have producers who try to step in because one day I had, this is the truth, GMFB, and then I was doing Total Access in the same day. And the producer's like, hey, do you want me to step? And you're like, no, dude, like, it's fine. Like my job is not very difficult. Like I can handle this, but thank you for looking at, that's what the NFLPA does. There's no snitches on the Bears. This is a team of ball players. So Vincent, do not be worried about that. Sammy, what do we got next? Is Chicago going after DK? What do you think?
I don't think that they can afford him. I know that they've got some cap room. But this man is going after being the highest paid NFL wide receiver at this point, and you can't make him the highest paid NFL wide receiver if you're the Bears. So
why not? Why can't the Bears do that? I mean, what's the point of having that much cap room if you're not going to spend it on somebody like DK Metcalf?
Because what is it, like 20? They have 22? Something like that? I think DK is going to be closer to 30 a year. That's my problem. That's what I'm saying.
But can't you do that? Like Tyreek Hill's getting $1 million.
I know. You can do you can do that, but like you're going to have to atone for that at some point. Like, I don't know.
Let the 2026 Bears worry about that. We don't need to. We're talking about now.
I know. This is also coming from someone who, like, when I don't want to deal with something, I'm like, that's a problem for future Carmen. Future Carmen can deal with
right?
that.
Exactly.
The future. Yeah. Okay. I mean, if you want to be reckless about it, but then that just goes against everything I just said about building a good foundation and developing your team. You are set to have quite a bit of cap space next year. God, now you're talking me into this. I don't know.
This is the thing. Like, obviously, you don't want to go out there and spend that kind of money for Christian Kirk. But at some point, I don't know. I mean, like, do the Bears at some point you build through the draft? They're going to have a full draft next year. Of course, you would lose a number of picks. I mean, just to get DK into the building. I mean, when do you wait for that? Do you wait for free agency?
Yeah, do you wait to see what Justin Fields actually materializes as? Yeah. And I mean, like, because at this point, like, not that I don't think the Bears can have a successful season, because I do, but like, if you're going to shell out that kind of money and kind of handcuff yourself for your future, do you want to do it now?
Yeah.
I think maybe next year, again, like, they're set to have, like, I think close to 100 million in cap space next year.
It's true.
But I can't see you try, like, handcuffing yourself to, like, in that way when you're still in the process of building. I think if DK moves and doesn't go to the Seahawks, he goes to a team that is a little bit further along in their build up process. As much as I would love to have DK, don't get me wrong.
No,
if you want to be reckless, just go for it.
You know what, it would, but again, it makes.
Try to be smart about it.
No, but it does make a lot of sense, and it does. You want to adhere to the plan. Like, you know what, like, if you're sitting there and you've gone out one night and you're like, hey, you know what, and you've been responsible and you got to drive and you're doing whatever, and you've just had water all evening. At 1 a.m, you don't start doing shots. Like, it sounds fun, but you're like, no. Like, well, I've come this far. Let's see it through. There'll be another day. I think, again, like, DK might not even get a contract this year and eventually ends up being set free next season, similar to what happened with Russell Wilson. The Bear, it's one of those things, like, we don't know. We don't know who's going to hit the market next year. We don't know if somebody's going to end up getting cut loose. What if, I don't think T. Higgins, that's probably a bad example, but, like, there's going to be some players that we don't think of that'll eventually get out there
or are available for trade. Like, I mean, like, it's not even a matter of if they're cut and they're on the market. It's like, we saw this offseason that no one's off limits at this point, apparently. As far as, like, trade value and stuff goes. Although I would really, really love to have a couple years of first round picks with the Bears. I would really love.
Yeah.
I would really.
I know, and
they've been used to in recent memory.
And if we're as terrible as everybody thinks that we're gonna be, like, well, then why do we get rid of the first round pick? I don't know. I'm torn. I love the Madden part of it. Like, if you're playing Madden, like, why wouldn't we make this deal? But let's be smart. Let's go. And honestly, like, if I'm sitting there, like, when you're talking, like, pennies on the dollar, like, how much would it cost? How much? Like, if you're going onto the lot, and obviously DK Metcalf's the most expensive vehicle there, you're like, what do you got? You got a Tyler Lockett over there. Like, what do you need for him? Like, but again, I think the Seahawks are deluded into thinking that they're going to compete this year. So I don't even
understand what they're doing. I have no idea, because I'm like, you don't know who's going to be throwing DK and Tyler the ball.
Oh, they're going Drew Lock. They like Drew Lock. They love him. They think he's the guy. They think he's the answer. I don't know. Listen, that's a Pete Carroll thing.
I hope for Drew Lock seems like a really nice kid. I really hope that
wonderful
works out for him.
Very nice person.
I really.
Speaking of nice people, Sammy, I'm sure we have more questions. What is her assessment of polls so far? We talked about it a little bit, but what do you think overall?
No, again, I really appreciate especially in, like, a media market too that is so tough. Like, Chicago is one of the tougher media markets, to kind of have sustained success in. But I do think that maybe Ryan Pace played a little bit of a role in this, where, like, Ryan Poles was like, okay, well, they held on to Ryan Pace through quite a few questionable moves, so maybe my leash isn't as short as some, right? And I think he recognized that, and he's doing things the right way. He's taking that, like I said, slow and steady approach. He's trying to build this foundation. I love that, he's building from the trenches. I'm a trench girl myself, so I tend to place my trust into these linemen, and he is a former offensive lineman, and I just think that they're the best. So I appreciate that he didn't go out and try to, make a quick fix in any way, or make a big, huge splash just because he knew it would maybe, garner him some, I don't know, like some accolades or
some clout.
Some clout. That's the word I'm looking for. I appreciate that he's not about the clout, and why would he be? Because again, he's an offensive lineman. So I really appreciate that approach, and I think that he's doing things the right way. And I think that he's earned just the opportunity to have a chance. And I think that that's what we need to ask Bears fans, is to just give him a chance, because again, I am trusting the process. I'm choosing to trust the process this time.
Choose positivity, choose the process. I agree wholeheartedly. I've echoed the very similar sentiments over all these shows. So I agree with you. Sammy, what else do we got here? I'm sure it looks like we got plenty of people. Ethan wants to know, how effective do you think David Montgomery will be? The birthday boy himself. What are we looking for this season from David Montgomery? I on Instagram said the 2022 leading rusher. I might be shooting my sights a little bit high. Well, what do you think?
That being said, though, I don't think it's too much to say that this offense will live and die with David Montgomery. Because you need, the best thing you can get a developing quarterback is a good run game, because that means that you've got a good offensive line in front of you and you got some guys in the backfield with you that are ready to go to war. And I think that David Montgomery is, as long as he continues the trajectory that he seems to be on, and I think everything that's come out from OTAs and stuff about Luke Getsy saying that they want to incorporate a lot more play action, in order to, that not only helps Justin Fields too, that helps that offensive line, right? Like it delays the pressure. And in order to do that, you have to have a legitimate running game. You can't just establish the run so you can do play action. No, you have to have a legitimate threat of the run. And I mean, the Bears did a good job of that last year. They have the personnel to do it. It's interesting because if you look at the Packers, last season, they were tied with the Bucs actually in their play action usage percentage. I think it was like 10.4%, which is like 26th in the league. But then again, you have Aaron Rodgers. You don't need to necessarily help him. You don't need to, he can make those decisions as quick as anybody. He can get the ball out as quick as anybody. So I think that David Montgomery is going to be instrumental in how well Justin Fields develops and how much time he has, and him not having to have hero ball. It's 1,500 yards out of the question. No, I mean the Bears were top 10 in rushing percentage last year. Yep. I don't think so. I mean, but I like, the thing is though, the only thing about that is I like Khalil Herbert, and I like the tandem.
Yeah.
So I don't like. Can one have a 1,500 yards and the other have 1,000? I don't think so.
Maybe. Well, listen, that's one of the things. God bless Packer fans. They always feel they're so fragile. They're so fragile. I pointed out. I'm going to start talking with my hands. I pointed out that the Packers had two running backs who had over 1,100 scrimmage yards, but I was saying that as a good thing. And Packer fans are all upset. I'm like, that's good. I'm just saying that Luke Getsy doesn't mind using a pair of running backs. Right. So that might hinder David Montgomery's ability to win the rushing title, but it does show that they will run and utilize their running backs. And I think that, and
to be fair, I think 1,500 all-purpose yards is certainly within
100%
the realm of possibility. For David Montgomery, for sure, even if Khalil Herbert has a more work put on him, which I think he's earned so far.
Yeah, I think AJ Dillon had 800 rushing yards right around there last season. I think that Khalil Herbert could easily factor into that. And as much as they're going to run, and they will run a lot, I think that both those guys can be successful. Okay, maybe David Montgomery won't win the rushing title, but listen, it's good to put things out there. Let them breathe a little bit, Just try to breathe things into existence. It hasn't worked so much with the Angels, but anyways, what about another question? I know we're not going to do that. How well will Equanimous St. Brown do?
He was kind of buried on the depth chart, right? Like I would be interested to see what he can do with some more work. And I mean, he came out of a really good program at Notre Dame, and when he came into the league, and I just think that he just hasn't had a shot yet. Even more than him, why aren't we talking more about Daz Newsome? He was the Bears' second receiver last year. Isn't he going to step up? I feel like We're acting like
where is
Darnell
he?
Mooney was the only receiver this like last year that the Bears had, and Allen Robinson. But
I'm curious, where is Dez? I haven't heard a peep out of him. What are we supposed to infer from that?
I don't know. What are we? Is it just one of those things where he was just kind of down on the depth chart, and Fields is kind of looking all. I think it really does depend though how well Fields kind of meshes with some of these guys in training camp and who he feels comfortable with. And I don't necessarily know that it's going to be a receiver. Quite honestly, it could be Cole Kmet. So.
Yeah, how do you feel about Cole Kmet? I mean, we're the show. We're big Cole Kmet guys. Where do you come down on Cole Kmet?
I mean, how can I not be a Cole Kmet girl when he's a Chicago native?
Right. Went to Notre Dame though, not
went
Northwestern.
to Notre Dame. Like he's just he oozes Chicago, right? You want to root for the hometown kid. But that being said, and this was I feel like I caught a little bit of this conversation in your last episode when you had Clay on. About tight ends, just given that I love trench guys because they don't get enough love for what they do. You don't understand all the nuances. I feel like the average fan doesn't understand the nuances of what go into being an offensive tackle, defensive tackle, whatever it is on either side of that line. Tight ends are right there with them because tight ends have to learn what the offensive line knows, and they have to act as an extension of the offensive line, which means the offensive line is so unique in that it is the only unit where all 5 or 6 guys, if there's a tight end attached, have to work cohesively, and it's the same guys on the field. There's not a rotation usually. There shouldn't be a rotation. And they have to work as one, and to sort of be a part of that and then not be a part of that, but then also have to be a threat in the receiving game and catch passes and take hits. And sometimes you're asked to block defensive ends and all this crazy stuff. Tight ends don't get enough credit, and I feel like they need a chance to develop. And so now you've got Cole Kmet. I was actually just talking about this concept with the Bucs tight ends coach, who's a good friend of mine, a couple of weeks ago, because they drafted 2 tight ends, and I was kind of picking his brain about them. But those true Y tight ends, the ones that can block and catch passes, just don't really exist anymore. And it's because in the college game, you're essentially using tight ends as bigger bodied receivers. And we've seen that carry over to the NFL. You see guys like Travis Kelce, you see Mark Andrews in Baltimore. And you don't have those guys that are just really well-rounded tight ends anymore. You have the F tight ends. You don't have these Y tight ends. And I think that Cole can become one of those Y tight ends. You just need to let him develop a little bit more. And so now I think that this is the year that he can put it all together. And that's the thing too, tight ends present so many amazing mismatches because they're too fast for linebackers to cover. They're too big for safeties to cover. So and then on top of that, you don't know if they're going to stay in or if they're going to release into a route. So you can do so many cool things with tight ends. And I hope that I'm willing that for Cole Kmet. I love it.
Yeah.
I love him. I'm a big Cole Kmet girl.
Absolutely. And it takes these guys a couple of years to get acclimated for the reasons that you just laid out right there. So again, for everybody who wants to just dismiss him like he was some sort of bust, and they always make fun of the Bears for carrying a bunch of tight ends, I think it just shows the importance of it. And if you can have O'Shaughnessy and the Family Guy, Ryan Griffin, to help him along the way, I think that's nothing but a positive. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. And I think a lot of it too comes from fantasy people who just want
exactly. You want the gaudy stats. You want I get that. I totally get that. But that's only half of a tight end's job. I mean, I saw Rob Gronkowski up close, and his first couple games back that first year after he was in retirement the last year, everyone was kind of getting on him oh, he's not what he used to be. And I'm he's getting acclimated to the game. And also, do you see what he's doing as another member of that offensive line?
As a blocker,
because this guy is taking on everybody and their mother, and he's winning. And I'm I don't understand how you don't see it. He even joked, he's I'm a blocking tight end now. And it's but he is. He's probably the best blocking tight end we've ever seen. He just happens to also be one of the best receiving tight ends we've ever seen.
That was, that's one of the things that a lot of people, when they talk about who the greatest tight ends of all time are, for me, it's easy. It's Rob Gronkowski because he's as prolific of a receiver as anybody, but can actually block.
It's amazing. And he's really fast, despite the fact that he looks like a giraffe when he runs. I've never quite figured out the physics behind it. I think his stride is longer than most people's.
Yeah.
That has to be it, because when he runs, it doesn't look like he's running super fast. And then all of a sudden he covers 40 yards of ground and you're oh, okay. Do that.
Yeah, he's just again. Such a 100%. Like, it's just such an unusual. Human beings aren't really made that way type of situation, but he's the best. But let's see. How about another question, Sammy?
Ooh.
Being a trench girl yourself, what is your opinion on the O-line situation?
I know.
Do you
I'm
think
an offensive lineman at heart.
Yeah, of course. But do you think this regime has it figured out?
I mean, if anyone's going to figure it out, it's going to be Ryan Poles, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, you don't need to have all these big names on the offensive line to make them go. We just talked about how they're such a cohesive unit. As long as you can get 5 guys that can play together, that's going to offset any sort of, weaker link or whatever it is. And again, like, you drafted a bunch of guys. You have to trust that your GM, who was an offensive lineman, can evaluate offensive linemen, and that he's not just taking shots in the dark at these guys that they took. So if anyone can figure it out, it's going to be Poles. And I know that it's not flashy, it's not whatever, but I'm okay with that as long as it works. And, I hope it works, because obviously I don't want Justin Fields to get injured. That would be like the most catastrophic thing that could happen.
Yes.
And I think that that's like their number one priority, is to make sure that, like, Justin Fields is safe this year while he's still developing. But I think they realize the importance of that, though, as well. And so I have full and total faith. If there's one position group I have full and total faith in the Bears figuring out, it's the offensive line.
What do you think about Lucas Patrick coming in to be the center? I really love that move. Yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
I like that too. I think that to have that anchor in the middle, an experienced anchor in the middle is huge. And because they're really the ones that are going to be calling the shots. They're the leaders of that offensive line. And especially when you have a young quarterback behind you. Like, I've talked to Ryan Jensen, the Bucs center, about this center quarterback relationship so many times, because I'm so fascinated by it, because he had Jameis before he then had Tom Brady. And there is a difference. It's because centers can kind of be the ones sometimes to make the checks, to make the calls, do all that kind of stuff. They can even be the ones to, like, suggest audibles pretty much, depending on who you've got behind you. And so I think when you have a young quarterback, you want an experienced guy in front of him that's going to be able to, point out the mic point, make all the checks, and tell him, what he's looking at, in case, he doesn't. Whereas, and that was the difference that Ryan would always tell me, is like, with Jameis, he did a lot more. And with Tom, it was like, all right, I'm just going to shut up and snap the ball.
Oh, okay.
That was
Ryan. Okay.
Yeah. Ryan, Ryan, the difference between working with a younger quarterback.
He took over with Jameis. I got you. I was like, wait a minute.
Yes, like working with a younger quarterback versus working with an experienced one. So that way, you have someone working with a younger quarterback in Lucas Patrick that is more experienced and can kind of help bring him along and help him develop too.
Yeah, I think that was one of the better low-key signings of the offseason, one of the first moves that they made with this team. All right, Sammy, let's go. Let's go with the another question. Laz wants to know, will the Bears go after Larry Ogunjobi once again? It feels like he was a little bit bitter, seemed upset, but at the same time, he hasn't signed anywhere else. Do you think that he could end up coming back into the fold?
I don't know. I think that, especially with like a new regime and stuff that's come in, I think that once that door is pretty much shut, like it's closed, it's locked at the same time. Yeah. Like, I don't know. We not to bring everything back to my experience with the Bucs, but
please, I mean, that's important though. That's tangible experience.
It's tangible where I've seen it. I mean, that kind of happened with Gerald McCoy when Bruce Arians came in. So, he was a guy that he was a free agent, and they just kind of let him go without any fanfare, like as the new regime came in. And I know he was bitter about it. That being said, Gerald, I don't think would rule out going back to Tampa. I don't know that he would go back. I mean, he might go back now that Todd Bowles is the head coach, actually.
Yeah.
But I think that there was a little bit of bitterness there, and that plays a role into it. When you're a free agent and you can choose where you go, you're always gonna want to go where you feel wanted. And I think it's hard for you to kind of do a 180 and say, no, but we do want you, after not signing you and having the cap space to do so. So I wouldn't.
That's true. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to build that bridge again. By the way, did Tom Brady, did he hate Bruce Arians? Was that legit? They don't like each other, don't they?
No, not, okay. It really made me laugh, honestly. The whole red pen situation where like Bruce would come in and slash his red pen across the game plan and change everything. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like Bruce was so like, Byron, you handle it. Tom, you handle it. Clyde Christensen, the quarterback's coach, you handle it. Mm-hmm. If anyone was taking a red pen to the game plan the night before, it was Tom. And like Tom did that a lot because Tom is Tom and he's a perfectionist and he just over and over again. So he would change things up until the night before. But that wasn't Bruce. And they had a great relationship. They were fine. Like, I think what's really funny is people like don't think that like because Tom Brady is Tom Brady, they don't think he wants to be coached. And they like, I think there's just this general sense that like the greats like Peyton Manning and even Aaron Rodgers, as much as it pains me to say it, like don't want to be coached. That's not true. Like Tom loves to be coached and like, because he loves another set of eyes on what he's doing so that he can become even better. Like he knows that that's a competitive advantage. So why wouldn't you take it? Why would you leave it all up to yourself when you've got all of these resources around you? So it was really funny.
I feel that. I feel that with Tom Brady too. I would agree with that. Although I think that Peyton Manning probably doesn't want to be coached. And it's why Peyton Manning never won a Super Bowl and Tom Brady has 7. And I know somebody's going to come in and be like, he's got 2. No. He was on 2 teams that won Super Bowls in the same way that David Carr has a Super Bowl because he was on the Giants, and just happened to win one, especially that Super Bowl 50. That was a joke. That's my editorializing. I'll move on.
Revisionist history. It's revisionist.
I don't want. You know what? Rex Grossman wasn't the quarterback. Whatever. We don't have to do that. Poor Rex is over there suffering.
Go.
It's all suffering. He's suffering. Sammy, save us with another question, please.
So much suffering.
HL Priest, why don't you ask her herself? Do you believe in Justin Fields? Do you think that he's going to be the franchise? He's got the HL's got the jersey on, so we know where.
I know. So clearly he does. No, I'm so excited about Justin Fields. I apologize if it hasn't come across that way already because like this kid he's so athletically gifted. And do you know how much it takes for me to root for a guy from Ohio State? It takes a lot. It takes a lot, and I'm doing it for the good of the Bears, for the good of this kid who I wholeheartedly believe in. And I think too, because he has the skill set to where this league is going. And if he has this offensive coordinator now that is willing to build an offense around him and play to his strengths, then the sky's the limit for that kid. Like he's got every intangible you could want. Everything coming out of Bears camp is how he's a great leader and all the guys are gushing over him. And like, I know that that's what you say to the media either way, but like, you don't have to go out of your way to say that. And it seems a lot of these guys are, and I appreciate that. And I think that there's obviously truth behind that. And I do, which is weirdly like, one of those things that maybe I probably put more stock in than other people or whatever. But like the fact that Eberflus has said like, no, there's going to be captains this year. Like I'm not going to do this revolving door or whatever the heck he was doing. Like it allows leaders to be leaders and to feel secure in that. And when leaders feel secure in that and they feel responsible and accountable for the locker room, I mean, that's only going to, I feel like, make this team better. And that's what Justin Fields seems to be. Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you, HL.
But I think that that's what's going to make Justin Fields into a better leader is when like you're tasked with that, you feel responsible for that. Like you have no choice but to kind of rise up to that. And I really like that. And nobody's really talking. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about that. And I really appreciate it.
No, they're too busy saying he's a bust. They're pulling out film that's not even him and being like, see, this guy can't play. You're like, that's from 2020, Screech. Like, that's not just whatever. People are hilarious. People so ready to move on from like, what is it? What do they do?
It's the instant gratification.
What do they do? What do they do? I'm like, he's got at least 4 years. Like, they're not gonna like whatever happens is I still don't even think they would move on from him. They'd be like, okay, let's try to fix some more things. As long as you'll be able to tell. And I think that we've seen enough already where he's heading in the right direction. So HL, I hope that answered your question. What about another one, Sammy? Where do you guys see the Bears? Where will they end up in the NFC North standings? Carmen, don't disappoint me. What do you think?
Okay, so, all right. So
I don't like the way this is. I don't like the way this is started.
No. It's good. It's good. I promise. I started being in the Bucks bubble for the last 6 years, I have some catching up to do when it comes to the rest of the league, right? So I started my own little curriculum preparation for the season. I'm going division by division, and I started with the NFC North this week. And I was looking at the Bears schedule, obviously in particular, and I'm going through it, and I easily got to 9 wins, honestly, for the Bears, because not only that, the tests that they face this season are pretty much, besides the Packers, obviously, are in the AFC. So I'm you can make up a lot of ground in the NFC with the opponents that you're about to face. And the NFC is a weaker conference. There's no denying that. And the NFC North isn't the most competitive of the NFC conferences. So I'm not going to go so far and be like, oh my God, they're going to win the NFC North. But I could see them. It's going to be them or the Minnesota Vikings that are going to end up going neck and neck, I feel like, and someone's going to end up in the 2 spot. And I could see the Bears ending up in the 2 spot. 9-8 is probably going to be enough for the wild card in the NFC if this goes how we all think it's going to. So I could see second.
A lot of parity in the NFC. There's a lot of opportunity there. Some teams that are not going to be so good, the Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, we don't anticipate them being good. I know the Saints are a team that's interesting, and everybody's like, it's the same system. There'll be no drop-off. I'm you're going to go from Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm. I've had so many conversations about this with my team at the Draft Network.
Listen, when Sean Payton was removed a number of years ago, I don't know why he wasn't the coach. Something happened. He disappeared for you. I'm just kidding.
He got suspended.
I don't know what happened. I'm just saying that. Kevin James took over. I don't know what it was. They went from 3-13. They went 13-3 to 7-9, and then Sean Payton comes back and they're 11-5. I don't know. Maybe Sean Payton is a good coach. Maybe he's okay.
I wholeheartedly, as much as they were the thorn in the Bucs side the last years. I was pretty much the whole time I was with the Bucs.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about Sean Payton as a play caller. And there's an intangible benefit to that even it could be the same system, it could be the same guys. But I have this conversation with the team about Jameis in particular, because in the 7 games he played last season with Sean Payton as his play caller, he looked to have turned over a new leaf. He was taking less risks. He's more of a game manager. It looked like, he wasn't as errant, and he wasn't as erratic, and didn't, seem to try to play hero ball. But I'm it's also because Sean built him a system where he didn't have to make those decisions. Sean was making those decisions for him. And I'll be interested to see if Dennis Allen is equipped or capable of doing the same. And my answer to that is probably not, or at least not in the first year. Yeah. And so it's going to be interesting, Jameis, if he goes back to kind of what we were used to in Tampa, or if he continues the momentum he started in New Orleans. But without Sean Payton, I have serious doubts. And I don't even like giving him that much credit, but I do.
You have to. And it's I
have to.
When I play with my friend, when I'm golfing, my buddy John Eric, I'm very smart, play the right shots and do whatever. And then when he's not there, I'm yep, I'm risking it. Driver off the deck, let's do it. There's a certain thing that you revert back to when you don't have that good influence on you. And I think Sean Payton deserves a lot more credit. I don't have the Saints making the playoffs, although a lot of my colleagues just love to say, I'm you guys, I saw Dennis Allen coach the Raiders. It didn't work out. All right, let's.
The defense is good. We'll see.
The defense. That's what I would have. When I did when my predictions drop in a couple of weeks. They're working on them right now. We filmed them already. I'm the Saints will still be a thorn to the Buccaneers, because what hurt the Buccaneers was the defense. So I can see that still playing, that's still being the case. But for the rest of the league, they're all going to beat that team. But in any event, let's do one more question. Then I got to let you go, because there's a lot of questions. Let's go Bears. What do the Bears try to do schematically this year? What is your read on that? What do you think? I know we've talked about it a little bit, play action and things of that nature. But what do you think the scheme? What do you think the identity, the scheme is going to be of this team?
Yeah, I really think that they're going to have a really well-balanced system again, because again, they have the personnel already to do it. They proved that last year without, a sense of direction. And then like we were talking about before, Getsy's done this in Green Bay and like in all of his stops prior to that. So I think it's going to be a really balanced attack. And I think again, it's going to insulate and it's going to allow for Justin Fields to still play like Justin Fields. But like, I love that clip that's been going around about, I think it was against the 49ers, where he's like backpedaling all over the place and all this other stuff. And then he ends up making it into the end zone, and it's incredible. Yeah. And it's a wonderful feat. And I really love that he has the capability of doing that, but I don't want to make that a habit. So
you don't have to do that on every play.
Don't have to do that on every play. So if you have a really balanced offense, which I think that they will, you can let Justin take those shots, because you know that if it doesn't work out or whatever, like you're not living and dying with the pass essentially. And you're not expecting him to, throw the ball 50 times a game, because that's unsustainable for everybody but Tom Brady, apparently, even at 45 years old.
Right.
But that being said, I would expect a pretty like balanced offense from them. And I think that would be good for Justin. And then defensively, obviously you've got this 4-3 scheme that really, these guys, they get after the ball. They through the air, forcing fumbles, all that kind of stuff. Like everything is about the ball, and everything, I think a lot hinges on the secondary, which is a little bit different than the defenses that Bears have seen in recent years, at least ever since I was growing up. I feel like everything was more about the front and there's middle linebackers and stuff like that. Whereas now I feel like the onus is going to be on the secondary, which again is where this league is moving with all these pass.
I think that's because of the league. But what do you think though? I think a lot of it's because of where the league is going.
Yeah.
That the second, but I think a lot of it, like it does kind of remind me the way that Eberflus approaches defense is a philosophy. They got to use the 3 technique and a lot of that stuff. They got to get pressure from the defensive line. I think there's a lot of Lovie Smith here, and I love the acronyms and all that stuff. I think we're starting to get a little bit more of a Lovie Smith type of feel, and I like that kind of defense and kind of the way that it presents myself. And as somebody who's, you're a trench person, trench girl. That sounds wrong, but it's like it just feels like it's refreshing in a way. Even though that I was kind of hesitant at first, I kind of like the way that it's moving in that direction.
Yeah, and and not to say that the front can't have obviously an impact on passing. If you collapse the pocket, you don't give quarterbacks time to throw. That obviously helps the secondary and helps the back end. And that is, I'm a little worried about the Bears front, to be quite honest, their defensive front, because obviously you lost Akeem Hicks, but then you also lost Walt Nichols, which isn't nothing. So now and then you got the whole whatever. So we'll see how that ends up going. But it's really nice to know that you've got depth and you've got really good talent in like the back end, including the middle linebackers too. So
I love it. The way it's progressing, the way they're building this roster. There's a lot of stuff that I appreciate what they're doing. And even though that I wanted to go offense at one point, and you can pull the receipts up, I'm like, forget the defense. But now I've come around completely. And so I love it. I love the way that the team is going. By the way, if you're loving this podcast, if you could comment with the word sick in the comments right now, just type in sick. Let us know that you're enjoying this. And by the way, I got to say, Carmen, thank you so much for being here. You've been an absolute delight. By the way, I didn't show up. Thank you.
Guys,
show off the jacket. I didn't get enough love to the jacket. That's a pretty dope jacket.
So I don't know if you can see it in the back, but I've got the bear head behind it.
Whoa. That is really nice.
I've had it for God knows how long, and it's the best thing I own as far as but I'm really hot actually right now. This has been.
That's vintage.
Listen, I wore it for the brand. You
got to suffer for your craft. I wore my dad's starter jacket when I was interviewing Jim McMahon. So it's you just got to suffer. You got to make those.
Well, so this thing, the last game I was at as a fan, last NFL game I was at as a fan was actually at Soldier Field. It was a Monday night game against the Dallas Cowboys in 2013 in December. And it was -6 on the field without the wind chill.
Oh, I remember this game. Yes.
Oh, so it was I went with my friends and in the nosebleeds or whatever, but thank God, because my dad was with some clients or something in the club level, because then he snuck me in there because it was way too cold. That being said though, this jacket, I wore this jacket with a bunch of stuff underneath it and all the hot hands. And I don't think I could have been warmer. This thing was, I don't know. it was the most wonderful, cozy thing, and it wasn't that bad. But like, no matter 3 pairs of leggings I had on weren't doing anything, and I was just like, I need hot chocolate. Get me inside.
Yeah, it's difficult. I remember that game. There was another game against the Cowboys that was super cold as well. And I remember we sent the cast of NFL Fantasy Live, not me, not the Chicago guy. They sent Damashek. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, why would I go? Why would I go back to my hometown as a conquering hero? I get to sit in studio with Molly Karam, although that wasn't bad. Molly's delightful.
I like Molly. She's great.
Molly's amazing. She's one of the nicer people in the industry. So, but in any event, but you know what? I appreciate you doing this. I'll tell you what. Next time you return, you don't have to wear the jacket. It's okay.
Okay. I've got a ton of I've got vintage sweatshirts. I've got
all right,
all the things. This is this is so nice. I'm out of hibernation. I can actually wear the Bears things that I own and am proud of.
Well, the next time, I appreciate that. The next time you come on, I will pull out the vintage Mike Singletary sweatshirt that I have. You can pull out. We'll do something. We'll do it. We'll make it a thing. But I really appreciate you being here tonight. And actually, we've extended we've kept you on a little bit too long now. But how can everybody follow you on Twitter? Where can people read your content, or what do you got? What do you got going on right now? Is the time for the plugs and everything. What do you got?
For the plug. CARMIEV, Carmen V on Twitter, on Instagram, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to view it, on TikTok. And then I write for the Draft Network. I am their managing editor, but the
managing editor. You're a big wig there.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I would classify myself as such, but we've got a lot of talented writers, a lot of talented and scouts that they do all of this evaluating themselves, and they're peeling back the curtain on that process, and it's really, really cool to watch. And so I implore you to go to the Draft Network to check out their content, check out my content, and I really appreciate you, Adam. Thank you so much for having me.
Implore. That's a word I love to use as well. Implore. Such a powerful word. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Carmen. We look forward to having you again at some point in the near future. Take care and bear down. We'll see you soon.
Bear down.
All right, there she goes. The great Carmen Vitali. Oh, what a great show that was. What a great conversation. So hopefully everybody's not freaking out about losing the OTAs. Gave a lot of insight of what's going on with this Bears team, the transition to Matt Eberflus. I think there's a lot of positive things to be taken out of this. And of course, now this week, that's it. The team's done practicing. So you know what? Now it becomes the silly season, just a little bit of waiting. But we do have a great show for you lined up on Thursday. We're going to be bringing in Bridget Condon, who is one of my colleagues at the NFL Network. She has been at some of the training camps this week with the Los Angeles Rams. She's going out to Las Vegas to go see Davante Adams. So we'll gloat about Davante Adams no longer being a member of the Green Bay Packers. Talking about that. We'll get a little bit of a look at the NFL in general. So make sure, and we'll wrap up what had happened over the last couple of days with the Bears. So make sure you look out for the podcast dropping Thursday with Bridget Condon. But I want to thank everybody here who joined us tonight. Thanks for all the questions. We try to get through as many as possible. We don't have that much time, but we do appreciate everybody who is a part of the show. We see a lot of the repeats. Cannot thank you enough. Tell friends, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Share it if possible. If you like it, share it. If not, no big deal. No harm, no foul. But thank you to everybody. Thank you to Sammy for putting this together. And until Thursday, we'll see you then. Let's bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.